So hi everyone, welcome to class 9 of Freedom is the Future. This is our second to last class. This is the last official kind of, I don't know what to call it, not lecture, but like facilitation, I guess, that I will be doing. Just a reminder that our last class, and I'll get to the questions towards the end of the slide today, which is next week, is going to be just everyone going around hearing from you all, answering those 6 questions that we put up on the Google Classroom, and I'll also remind everyone of them tonight and just tag it again. You do not have to prepare these before. I'm going to give everyone like some time to reflect and think about them before we go around and share, but just in case, I know people like to have more time to prepare. Questions are there if you want to prepare something, but no pressure to create anything. You can just talk and share, and then Austin hopefully will get more of an in-depth what is the word I'm looking for? You sharing your trip to Palestine in more detail than we were able to hear last week. So if you want to share that and not necessarily answer those 6 questions, or kind of just see how what you learned in this class helped with your visit, you can share that also. Any comments, questions, concerns before we start? Okay, so today, what we wanted to kind of end on is, and this is usually for me a bit more inspiring, but more hopeful, ways to take, oppression and just awful things. I don't have perfect words today, I'm sorry, but taking that and turning it into something, symbols of resistance, basically something beautiful. It's into art, into symbols that last for generations, to show the significance of Palestinian resistance specifically. So that's what we're going to focus on, and hopefully this just kind of helps, is a nice way to bring everything we've talked about in this class. We've talked about a lot in this class. So look at our little caterpillar. We started with identity, our personal identity, Palestine's 101 identity, talked about Palestinian culture, we talked about the history from a Palestinian narrative. We talked about repression and how to combat repression and what repression against Palestinians looks like in this country. We talked about allyship, privilege, Indigenous and racial justice, Black and Indigenous solidarity through a solidarity panel. And now we're talking about what are the ways and more symbolic ways, or what has become symbols of Palestinian resistance. And I think looking through the symbols in art is a great way to talk about how Palestinians have resisted. It's not the only way that Palestinians have resisted, right? Resistance takes many forms, and we do not condone any types of resistance. We are condemn. We do not condemn any specific types of resistance. So we're not like, this way is the only answer and this way is the only answer. As you ask me personally, I think there are many different ways of resistance, and we need to be uplifting and encouraging all of those ways, because the end goal is always liberation. And so as long as whatever mode of resistance people are engaging in, as long as the end goal is always liberation, then there's space and room for all modes of resistance. And I'm talking very bluntly about violence versus nonviolence, art versus taking up arms. They shouldn't even be seen as something that's versus, actually, and that's something we do. So I just did that so subconsciously. It's right? And there are just multiple ways, because we need various people, whatever skills they have, whatever passions they have, to be involved in the struggle. And that's kind of how I see and justify all and any modes of resistance. Obviously, if you are like a traitor and a spy, that's not resistance, but like, you all know what I mean. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. I have a little discussion question to get us going. We'll just be going through some symbols of Palestinian resistance, which I'm sure many of you know of and know already. So I really just want you all to shout out what you think they mean, why they've become symbols, and why they're symbolic. And then we'll I have some cool videos of just different ways that Palestinians on the ground use art as a form or tool of resistance, and what they do with their art. And then I will just go over those last 6 questions for our next class. So the first question, or the way I want to form this discussion question, is thinking of the first images that come to mind when you think of Palestine. It could be in general or Palestinian resistance specifically. If you remember, we started class 2 of Freedom is the Future with the same question, but not images. It was just one of the first things that come to mind when you think of Palestine. So I want us to think specifically about images, and if you want to take a more specific, images of Palestinian resistance. And you could just unmute and shout them out or put them in the chat and I could read them. The flag, nice, yeah, we'll throw them, Brian said at the same time. Olive trees, I like that one. We don't usually think of olive trees as resistance, but I like that. Or if you meant it in general for Palestine too. The kufiye, yes, definitely that would go. Wearing the kufiye both for, I guess we'll get to it when we talk about it, but yeah, I'll wait. The famous photo of Faris Sada. Which photo is that? Oh, okay, the kid in front of the tank. See, it's really sad that I don't even know the names, but when you said that, you know what you're talking about. Any other images of resistance? I'll give like another minute. Yes, definitely the key. Oh, the BDS cartoon. Yeah. You mean hold on before I say the wrong thing. Which is the BDS cartoon? Oh, Handela. Okay, I was gonna say Handela, but I was like, I don't know if there's a different one. And yeah, and there's a reason that it's Handela, and what Handela symbolizes is very significant. And we're gonna cover that. The watermelon, yes, thank you, Nova. And the shape of Palestine. Beautiful. Yeah, the map. Cool. Thanks, everyone. So you all already said a lot of the symbols I'm gonna go over. But I think that, I mean, that's good, right? Because it shows how significant they are and they've become, and I just want to make sure we understand why they became symbols and what their meaning comes from. Because a lot of times in organizing, things have become normalized, but we forget the history and the legacy of it. So does anyone know what the key symbolizes? And you all can just unmute. So how's, and what is it a specific, so it's a symbol of Palestine and Palestinian resistance, but the symbol of something specifically too.
Return.
Yeah, perfect. Home, returning home. Yeah, from the Nakba, exactly. So the key became, so as the Nakba was happening and unfolding, Palestinians did not know the extent to which it was gonna continue happening, right? It was, and a lot of the history books will say, and this actually combats this very unfortunately popular myth where people say, well, if they cared enough, they shouldn't have left their homes in the first place. And that's something that a lot of people say. I think people say that more in Arab circles than non-Arab circles, to be honest. But that is something that people say. And so where the key becomes significant is people thought they were going to leave for a week, for 2 weeks, and then come home, right? No one could have imagined or envisioned that it was that 75 years later, they were not able to return home. And so the key, and specifically the big kind of more the key for older homes is the symbol, because people held on to that key for generations and generations, waiting for the right of return and waiting until the moment they returned. And if they weren't going to be able to return, they were going to pass it down to grandchildren to be able to one day go back, or just pass it down to other family members to be able to one day go back and open the house with their key. Unfortunately, we know that settlements have been built over most of Palestine, especially in the middle, what we call the 48 area, or what is called Israel. And so even knowing that your house is probably demolished and now is who knows what, a park, an airport, someone else's house, an apartment complex, the key becomes a symbol of not forgetting that it happened and not forgetting about the right of return. And the right of return is really important because even in even with in conversations with people who do care about justice and equality for all people, sometimes their politics stop at not return. Their politics will go to, well, keep Israel what it is, keep Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, just let them have full ownership West Bank and Gaza, but keep Israel. That to me leans more toward like two-state solution conversations, or people who still legitimize the existence of the state of Israel. But what the key does and what right of return does is it takes us beyond that and says, well, wait, all of that land is for Palestine. All of that land was colonized. We're not saying that Jewish people have to leave, right? But it should not be named Israel as the state. It could be Palestine and go back to, right? Palestine is not about religion. Palestine is a country and an identity. And so that's why the key specifically for the right of return becomes very significant and important. Any questions or other comments or anything I missed about the key? So the next one is the Kufiyya, which we all already said. And the Kufiyya, again, so it's become a very mainstream kind of normalized image of Palestinian resistance, mostly protest. If you don't know what the Kufiyya is, it's a scarf you wear on your head, you put on your neck. It has a lot of usage other than for protests, right? People wear it to cover their head from the sun. Palestine is a very farming agriculture nation, and so using it when you're out in the farms, protect yourself from heat and sun and things like that. But also, each of the patterns is also significant. It's not just a random pattern. So this pattern over here represents the olive leaves. Olive leaf pattern represents strength, resilience, and perseverance. Olive trees are also very important for Palestine. This part right here is the fishnet to represent the connection between the sailor and the Mediterranean Sea. So Palestinians are also a sailing country. And then the bold here represents the trade routes going through Palestine, which has a long and rich history of merchants, travel, and cultural exchange. So the patterns are very significant and symbolize different parts of Palestinian, I would say, economic life, because olive leaves and olives are also are sold for financial gain, but they also represent strength and resilience in that olive trees will always be there, right? Even though Israelis try to burn down olive trees too, that olive trees have existed and exist for many years and will remain there despite the occupation. And now, of course, it's also used as a symbol of Palestinian protest and resistance. So if you go to a protest, you'll be most likely wearing a hatta. It's just become a symbol of Arab resistance, but Palestinian resistance specifically. And we also wear it to showcase our solidarity. So for example, I was talking about the rally that was happening at Patterson City Hall. A couple of us attended wearing the kufiyya. It just becomes an unspoken way of showing solidarity too, and showing where our politics are at least for me, if I see someone wearing kufiyya or somewhere with a kufiyya, I'll know where their politics are at. Brian, did you want to add?
I wanted to ask a question actually. So I have like kufiyya pattern on like a hat I wear, coffee mug, like I bought them from Palestinian artists on Etsy and things like that, and I have an actual, a few of them actually, kufiyya, like the scarf or head covering, that I got from it's like the last remaining kufiyya factory there on the ground. Yeah. And but I always have felt awkward wearing it. It feels a little bit like cultural appropriation to me. And I've had difficulty with that, and I'm wondering what folks on the call think about that. Like, obviously I'm in solidarity, and I know that it also has like connections to like the Arab Revolt, that was pre-48, like but I don't know, maybe that's just my own thing that I have to work through, but I'm wondering what other folks think.
That's a great question, and thank you for asking it. Right, and this is I know we've talked about cultural appropriation in this class, and I think you've modeled a way to ask and engage with community. So I want to open it up to others before I share my thoughts. What do you all think, or how would you take it? Yeah, Dorothy?
Personally, when I see non-Palestinians going to it makes me really happy. And it makes me feel like we're not alone. So, and I think a lot of people feel the same way as well. But I feel very happy, and it makes me feel on the same thing.
So, Ronaldo, you were cutting up a little bit, but I think I got that you said it makes you happy seeing non-Palestinians wear it, right? Yeah, yeah. I think, and I agree, and I think, and like I said, I think it is an unspoken way of showing your politics and solidarity. I'll be honest, I would tell you, if you were someone who knew nothing about Palestine and thought it was like a cool, like, and I think this is where the appropriation comes, right? That you understand the significance, you're wearing it for the politics, you're wearing it to show up in solidarity. I think that's the difference. Like, I know that there was, I don't know what brand, there was like a brand that had like the design of the kufi, and they were like selling it, and they had no idea that it was Palestinian or what its origins were and things like that. So I think that's what, yeah, it's not radical. You're not doing it for Instagram photos and things like that. So I think that's the difference. But I thank you for being conscious of it too and asking. Any other thoughts on this? Anything else about the kufiya? Questions, comments? So another symbol is the land. And this is a picture from, I think it's from Land Day. So if you all don't know, March 30th marks what is known for Palestinians as Land Day. It's been going on for decades now. And it's basically a way of going back to talking about olives and olive trees. It's a way of showing ownership of the land, right? So saying that this is our land and we're not leaving. And there's a lot of cultural things that tie to the land. So if y'all remember like the Depke video we watched where they said, you know, when we stomp, we're stomping with passion of this land is ours. He's holding the an olive tree and probably going to grow it as a way of showing Palestinian life, that no matter what happens, we can continue growing trees. Olive trees take a long time to grow and nurture, and it takes a lot to nurture them, but Palestinians do that because of their connection to the land. And showcasing connection to the land is a very political act, because the whole point of Israel is to colonize and take and settle on the land. And from what we know, especially from what this country has done to this land, colonial forces do not know how to care for the land because they don't have the connection to the land. And I highly recommend you all read Mornings in Jenin. I was rereading it earlier, and they say, you know, there's a part where she says her dad said that the land doesn't owe us anything. We owe the land for what it gives to us. And that's very important, and especially for Palestinian farmers or land workers, or they're called fallahin, right? That they have a connection to the land, that their life is tied to the land, and so they care for and nurture the land. And you need that understanding, and that understanding usually is only found from indigenous cultures or people who are indigenous to that land. And so that's why, you know, you could talk, there's a lot of greenwashing. It's called greenwashing in Israel, where they try to say that, you know, we're the democracy and we have technology for climate change and climate control, but how can you be saying that and you're the one burning down olive trees, and you're the one burning down houses and demolishing things and building factories and settling on land that isn't yours, right? And so being critical of that from a symbolic connection to land, and also in a political way too, in ways that they try to justify it. But March 30th does mark Land Day for Palestinians. You'll see probably a lot of like social media activism on that day, people trying to you know, organize things probably in person to show their care for land, and just reminding that this land is ours and that Palestinians are the best people who know how to nurture and care for the land in Palestine. Any questions about land being a symbol. And this is where we can group in like olive trees and orange trees and flowers and things like that. And then Handala. So this is what Brian was saying is the BDS logo, or used a lot when talking about BDS. Handala was drawn by a very famous Palestinian cartoonist named Naji Al-Ali. I don't know why there's an L there, but it's Naji Al-Ali. And this is a quote from him. So he says, Handala was born 10 years old, and he will always be 10 years old. At that age, I left my homeland, and when he returns, Handala will still be 10, and then he will start growing up. The laws of nature do not apply to him. He is unique. Things will become normal again when the homeland returns. So what do you all think he means by this? So he was forced out of Palestine when he was 10 years old. So he draws Handala as a 10-year-old. So I want to ask you all what you think about why he's saying he will stay 10 until he goes back, and then just maybe anything from the way Handala was drawn that catches your eye. So any guesses about why he remains 10? Yeah, Brian?
Well, I don't know that I'm inside an artist's head, right? But I would imagine that in some ways the 10-year-old boy who was was removed from his home is still inside that artist, right? And can't heal fully, maybe, until return. And also, just for those of us on the outside, that suspension in time, I think, reminds us that like it's still there, and there is no, I shouldn't say there is no moving forward, but like I'm trying to put it into words, but like the fact that like he's 10 and he's not going to age until we return. So the fact that he's still 10 always reminds us that the return hasn't happened yet, and liberation needs to happen, right? Like we need to get this kid grown up. Come on, let's go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I think that's exactly it, that life should not move on as normal until liberation and until the homeland returns. So Handala really is a symbol of Palestinian refugeehood, Palestinian loss of childhood and innocence, and then the right of return. Is that in that one, we don't stop until return happens, that I cannot grow up and I don't want to grow up until I'm able to grow up in my homeland, that my innocence is lost, and I don't want any childhood unless it is in liberation, and then in refugeehood, right? And I think that point of life should not go back on like normal until return is a really important conversation when we're talking about Palestinian refugees, because a lot of the Israeli attacks and myths about UNRWA, which is the UN Relief Works agency that works specifically for Palestinian refugees, I don't know how those red lines just came up, but I didn't do that. Almost, anyways. But a lot of the attacks on Palestinian refugees is that they should just be integrated. Oh, and there's this video that I hate watching, but maybe we'll watch it if there's some time, because it's someone that like talks about why UNRWA does not actually help Palestinian refugees and just keeps their status as a refugee alive, when they should just go integrate into other countries and just become citizens of those other countries. And the reason that logic is flawed is that, one, a lot of countries don't allow Palestinian refugees to have citizenship. A lot of Arab, so Lebanon, for example, does not allow Palestinian refugees for citizenship. And even if you marry someone who, it depends, if like a Lebanese woman marries a Palestinian man, she's never able to give her kids Lebanese citizenship, or him. I don't know what the process is actually for him. I have to update myself on that. But a lot of countries don't give citizenship. And even if they do, a lot of Palestinian refugees do not want the citizenship. They want refugee status because refugee status means there's a place to return back to. And the reason that Israel keeps attacking and does not want UNRWA to be a thing and does not want Palestinians to be named Palestinian refugees is because being a refugee implies that you have somewhere else to go back to that you haven't went back to yet. And that would have to prove, and that exposes that Israel took something that wasn't theirs, right? And so Handela becomes a symbol of, I will continue remaining a refugee until I get back, and I won't move on with my life until I get back. And sometimes a lot of rhetoric from Arabs too is just go assimilate in where you are and forget about return. And Handela does the opposite of that. It's okay, Mona, you're good, as long as it wasn't some, I don't know, spy. Yeah. Any questions about Handela? If we have time, I will have us watch that video, or maybe watch the next class. It makes me upset. But Ragda, you watched it, right? Or no? Did we watch it in ACE? You know which video I'm talking about? Yeah. Any other thought or things I missed about Handela? And of course, right, past symbol of Palestinian childhood and what it means to be a Palestinian child too. And I think that's where like what he actually draws is really significant. His hands tied like this behind his back, like right here, like that usually, you know, when you draw that on cartoons, it's usually like someone fell or they're hurt or something. The patch right here. Yeah, Brian?
Yeah, oh shoot, I forget what I was gonna say. Well, also the I think being barefoot is part of that too. But you know, I think it also resonates for me because of a lot of the stuff we hear about, you know, what it means to be a kid there, right? Especially like in Gaza, right? You know, and you know, the care workers are essentially saying like, you know, we can't call it PT because there's no post, right? There's no P, right? Like, and just the mental health issues that young folks are having, and you know, I think that to me also kind of reminds me of that too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, and like how many, especially for children in Gaza, how many bombings and demolitions and things do you experience by the age of 8, right? Like too many. And so, yeah, and so it's not, there is no post-trauma. They're still living in the trauma, and that's going to affect them even after liberation and the occupation is over. Yeah. So the rock, of course, is a huge symbol of Palestinian resistance. It became a symbol most iconically during the first and second Intifada. But you know, the rock in front of the tank. Is this the picture you're talking about, Paulson? Yes, right. Okay, so I didn't know his name. Thank you for that. You know, it shows the difference of power for me is the most important, right? A lot of people say, well, why the rock? What is that doing? But to me, it's a symbol of look at what the colonizer has and look at what the colonized has to protect themselves. And despite that, you still are so fearful of the colonized, right? Even though the colonized has a rock and you have a tank, you're fearful of them. And then who does the media end up being calling violent? The Palestinian with the rock is still the one who's called violent, and not the Israeli tank or the military, the government that is supplying the tank. So the rock to me is a symbol of unfair power. And that's why when we say no justice, no peace, is that how do you want peace when this is the reality? So we're not on equal terms, we're not on equal levels of power. And the victim is still deemed the violent one, even though they're the ones without the same types of military or weapons of self-defense. And then something that I just thought of from the rally for Naji Seabrooks, who was murdered by Patterson police. So he was holding a knife and he was having a mental health crisis. And the cops shot him because of that, even though there was community intervention that he was trying to call at that same time, and the cops didn't wait for that. And what someone said on the mic was, if you are afraid of someone holding a knife, then you shouldn't be a cop in the first place, right? And we can have our politics of whether cops should exist in the first place at all, but if you are so fearful of someone, when you have all of what you have as a cop or as a military or whatever it is, and you are fearful of someone with a rock or a knife or Skittles, like it was for Trayvon Martin, then we really need to like reevaluate power and fear and who's really the person who's violent, which is something to think of. Yeah, Brian.
Sorry, I'm talking so much tonight, but
Okay.
I think what you pointed out too, really gets me how, like, I guess ironically enough, the analogy that it, comes from I guess Jewish scripture, right? David and Goliath, and the idea being that, like, in this case, like the Goliath paints itself as David all the time, right? Poor little Israel, right? And everybody must come to its defense. When the story is the complete opposite. And real quick, actually, we did we're still working on it, but in DSA we had this campaign that we're probably going to launch. It's called Solidarity Stories, where people make a video of like their journey to like Palestine solidarity, and and I was making mine, and I was noting that one of the first things I remember is stuff like this, these images. The first Intifada happened when I was 9 years old, and it was the first time it ever put on my radar that there was something going on there. Right. The only quote unquote Israel I ever knew was the one that like was in the Bible in my Catholic school. Right. Like I had no idea anything else was going on. And that started like the whole thing of like, wait a minute, why are they upset? Right. So
yeah. And I think you like, thank you for sharing that, because that proves why these images and these symbols are important, is that they do get to people, and they can get to people. And that's what a lot of artists say. And we're going to hear from some artists who say that. It's a way of like contributing to the revolution and getting the message across. So the newest one is the spoon. And there's I don't know how many people remember, I think it was like last year or 2 years ago when 2 years ago when prisoners escaped from one of like the highest security prisons in Israel using a spoon. And so it became another symbol of resistance. You guys can't hear it? I mean, it's just music, but I'm gonna actually just stop. So I think what's really powerful about the spoon is that, again, I think similar to the rock, that something as simple as a spoon could be used to escape from one of like highest security prisons. And really it's a symbol of, and it gave people a lot of feelings of hope, and just like of pride, right? And of resilience. And I think that's what it signifies, is no matter what you do, we can take something like a spoon and still use it for our freedom and for our liberation. So it's a symbol of Palestinian resilience and creativity, and standing up to oppressors and oppression no matter what. Any comments or questions about the spoon? So those are kind of the main symbols. I'm sure that there are many other ones. The watermelon is definitely a symbol that I think is the slide after this, actually. So we will get to that one. If anyone has other symbols that they are aware of or have seen, please put them in the chat. We could talk about them. I want to move us into just focusing a little more on artists and highlighting some artists. Let me see, actually, maybe we'll just do the watermelon first. Yeah, we'll do the watermelon just to end it with like specific symbols, and then we'll go into artists, although this is related to artists and what artists have done.
What is red, green, white, and black and represents the Palestinian identity? It's not the flag, it's the watermelon. Since it's summertime in Gaza and the height of watermelon season, let's talk about the story of how this delicious fruit became a symbol of resistance. The watermelon has become a symbol of Palestinian resistance over several decades, as it reflects the colors of Palestinian flag: red, green, white, and black. But what is the story behind this? In 1967, when Israel occupied the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, Israel's government banned all public displays of the Palestinian flag and its colors. Those who fly the flag in protest on their cars or in the streets could be arrested. Instead, Palestinians got creative, bringing along slices of watermelon to protests. In 1980, Israeli forces shut down a large art gallery in Ramallah and arrested 3 artists, Nabil Anani, Sliman Mansour, and Sam Baddar. During the crackdown, officers vowed to confiscate any paintings that reflected or encouraged Palestinian struggle, including any images of watermelon that mirrored the colors of the Palestinian flag. This encouraged more Palestinians to start using the fruit as a way to fight back. In 1993, at the height of the First Intifada, the New York Times ran a story detailing how the Israeli army had begun detaining any Palestinian caught carrying slices of watermelon. 30 years later, and it's no surprise, the watermelon has cemented its place in Palestinian society, becoming an official symbol for the Palestinian struggle.
من ضمن المعيقات بانه هذا المنتج الجيد اللي افضل منتج احنا قدرنا ننتجه، السوق المحلي مش قادر يستوعبه بسبب وضع الاقتصاد الصعب تبع الناس، كمان عاجزين عن التصدير، ممنوع نصدر بسبب الحصار المفروض على قطاع غزة. فاحنا وين بدنا نروح فيه؟ لو انا بقدر اصدره ممكن يساعدني في سد وتحسين وضع السعر تبعي لاقدر اني ما اخسرش. بس بنعاني كمان من وجودنا على الحدود، بدك تنسيق عشان تصل للبطيخ، واحيانا بكونش فيه، احيانا في يكون احداث، احيانا بصير تجريف، احيانا يعني انت من يوم ما تزرع وانت في قلق حتى تقطف.
In the heat of summer, watermelons are sold on nearly every street corner in Gaza and across Palestine, and eaten more than any other fruit. قلنا كيف بنقي البطيخ، يلا تعال. We check its sounds, you know. طيب. إذا كانت إيش؟
بالطوب يعني بتكون مرملة متفلة.
تمام. حاجة ثانية إيش كمان؟
هذه مرة نطلع حلو. بطيخة نظيف.
يعني هذا تمام 100% مسؤوليتك؟ طب هات السكين يلا. It's red and very sweet, really.
هو
الواحد بروح تعبان من شغله، بلاقي الكهرباء قاطعة، باخذ له شوية بطيخ، ببرد على حاله، باكل هو واولاده، بقعد هو واولاده، وبعدين بطيخنا ما تنساش من بيت حنون، اراضي بيت حنون، بطيخ كويس ومرتب.
Over 74 years of struggle, Palestinians have found creative ways of protesting against Israeli occupation. And watermelon has become nature's own Palestinian flag, a simple and juicy way of passing our heritage and history to the next generation.
Any thoughts on that video? Comment?
It was cute. That's just my cup.
Yeah. I like how he showed like how I think that the part that was cute is like, you know, after a long day, like, and you don't have much and you go home and you get to like enjoy a watermelon, right? And sometimes like those simple things are what get you through occupation and life. And like there's that stereotype that like Arabs love watermelon, and it's true, right? Like all summer I think we eat it, but there's like more reasoning behind it. So it's really important. Anyone else? And also the creativity of like, okay, you don't let us draw the Palestinian flag, so we're gonna find it in all aspects of life. And I think that shows how like resistance is part of and can be part of all aspects of life. And no matter, it's the resilience again, right? No matter what you take away, we're gonna conceive other ways to show our Palestinian pride. And also a reminder that the thobe and tatriz, a lot of women, when the Palestinian flag was banned, started stitching the Palestinian flag and tatriz in the colors of the Palestinian flag because of that. As you know, the body became political in that way. Well, where like, if you won't let me draw it, I'm gonna put it on myself, and the only way for you to take it away is for you to rip it off of me. And so all of these have become very important politically, socially, and culturally too. Any other thoughts or questions you want to know? Okay, so to go back to our Gaza street art. So I'm not gonna say much because the video explains it, but we all know that Gaza is called an open air prison. Gaza has sea, land, and air blockades and military blockades. It's very hard to get in and out of Gaza without Israeli control. They control the water access, food access. Gaza was deemed unlivable by 2020, but it's 2023 and people in Gaza are still here. Really, it's pretty, you know, it's pretty gruesome to say it this way, but just very blatantly, Israeli goal of Gaza was to bombard it and make life so difficult and keep bombarding it until people in Gaza just die out and they could take over that part of land. And that really is the end goal, and has been the end goal with Gaza, and that how it's a little different, situated a little different from the West Bank, although the West Bank also is going through a lot of its ethnic cleansing right now as we speak. But that is the point and the main goal of attacking Gaza every year, bombing Gaza every year. But despite that, people in Gaza continue to rebuild, continue to use art as a form of expression and part of the rebuilding, because they understand it as a political statement of, you can demolish all you want, we're going to continue to be here, we're going to continue to reproduce and have kids and not die off in the way that you want us to.
We have a few hours left until we leave Gaza, and I always really wanted to do a video about something that impressed me so much about this place, which is the graffiti and street art that's visible across all the walls in the whole strip. Some real meaningful stuff. And we're lucky enough to have our very own Bilal Khalid, a famous Palestinian calligrapher, artist, and photographer. He was born and raised here in Gaza, and he's been away for 4 years. So let's go and see what he's up to. بلبل حبيب قلبي قول لنا بقى ايه ازاي اتعلمت الرسم ده وايه الهدف ورا الرسم اللي انت بتعمله؟
فن الخط العربي أو فن الكاليغرافي أنا تعلمته من أنا عمري 12 سنة تقريبا أو 13 سنة. كنت دائما بروح عند خطاطين، عند محلات من اللي بيعملوا اللوحات التجارية والأشياء هاي بالخط العربي. بقعد بتفرج كيف الخطاط بيستخدم الريشة، كيف بيستخدم البوصة، كيف بيكتب، إيش الألوان اللي بيستعملها. فحبيت وتعلقت جدا في الخط العربي. ومن وأنا صغير أنا كنت بحب أخربش على الحيطان في المدرسة على الديسكات. فكنت شوية يعني في علاقة بيني وبين الحيطان من وأنا صغير. فأنا حبيت أدخل الخط العربي مع الجرافيتي، فبلشت أشتغل فن الكاليغرافي اللي هو فن تحوير الخطوط واستخدامها في فن الجرافيتي.
دي لغة الجدران، يعني اللي انت ايه ترسم حاجة على حيطة ليها معنى كبير. فانت بالنسبة لك دي يعني انت مثلا عايز تكون سفير اللغة دي في العالم كله؟
والله أنا حاب أكون سفير بلدي، سفير فلسطين للعالم من خلال الفن هذا. يعني أحاول أوصل رسالة شعبي من خلال فن الجرافيتي وفن الكاليغرافي. أحاول إنه أنشر هذه الثقافة وهذا الفن في كل أنحاء العالم. الحمد لله يعني أصبح الآن كثير من متابعيني يعني حتى الناس اللي ما بتحكي لغة عربية أصبح إنهم يطلبوا أعمال باللغة العربية، وهذا الإشي يعني كثير إنه أسعدني وإنه حسسني إنه أنا بديت أوصل للهدف اللي أنا قاعد بشتغل عليه.
شوف بيقول لك ايه متابعيني. He's saying about his followers. Bilal KH Instagram more than 12,000 followers. Follow it if you already haven't. He's got some amazing work. طب قول لنا حاجة تانية بقى. طبعا احنا عارفين ان احنا كان بقالك 4 سنين ما رجعتش. فقول لي بقى الإحساس ايه اللي انت ترجع بلدك تاني؟
وهذا الإشي اللي أنا كنت دائما بأحلم فيه، إنه في يوم من الأيام إني أرجع على قطاع غزة، أشوف أهلي، أشوف أصحابي، أشوف اللوحات اللي أنا اشتغلتها أيضا في غزة. بس للأسف يعني رجعنا زي ما أنت شايف، لقينا بعض البيوت مدمرة في آخر قصف إسرائيلي. بس يعني هذا يعني متعودين على هيك أشياء، لكن صامدين الحمد لله. بنحاول يعني هم بيهدوا واحنا بنبني ان شاء الله. هم بيصنعوا يعني هم بيخلقوا الموت واحنا بنصنع الحياة والفن من قلب الموت هذا.
Amazing. And like I said, of course, Bilal is part of the history here in Gaza. This is one of his artworks, which we're going to talk about. But his work is available everywhere to see when you come into the strip until you leave the strip. قول لنا بقى على ايه العمل بتاعك اللي انت بتحبه اكتر حاجة، اللي انت جيت اول ما جيت رحت اتفرجت عليه.
جدارية طفولة محاصرة على برج الضافر. احنا رسمنا عليه في 2015 بعد سنة من الحرب صورة لبنت صغيرة محبوسة تعبر عن الأطفال المحاصرين في قطاع غزة.
انت بتكتبه ده ايه معناه وليه بترسم هنا؟
طبعا انا جيت اليوم على منزل دار الشوة اللي في عندهم عريس كان راح يتزوج وبيته انقصف. لقيت القطعة هاي قطعة البطون اللي ما تبقى يعني من البيت، فحبيت اعمل عليها عمل فني نكتب عليها راجعين يا هوا. هي مقطع من اغنية لفيروز بتغني للحب، بتغني للسلام، بتغني انه احنا مهما صار راجعين باذن الله.
So basically, it means despite the rubble, despite the ruins, that this artwork will return and this building will return back to the air. Bilal has just transformed rubble and ruins into art and calligraphy. Bilal, amazing work, man.
حبيبي شكرا.
قول لنا بقى ايه رسالتك لفنانين غزة والفنانين عامة اللي بيتفرجوا على شغلك في جميع أنحاء العالم؟
رسالتي لفنانين فلسطين وفنانين غزة يعني هذا اللي بيعنيني أنا، إنه كل فنان فلسطيني لازم إنه يكون سفير لفلسطين وسفير للبلد، يحاول إنه يوصل رسالة هذه البلد من خلال الفن، سواء فن الجرافيتي، من خلال اللوحات، من خلال المعارض، من خلال التصوير الفوتوغرافي. كل إنسان بيقدر يخدم هذه القضية من خلال الفن أو من خلال أي مجال آخر، إنه يعني ما يستنى أو ما يتوانى عن خدمة هذه القضية.
رسالتك بقى للناس محبينك ومتابعينك في كل السوشيال ميديا اللي هم بيبصوا على شغلك وبيلاقوا يعني انسبيريشن منه؟
يعني رسالتي لهم إنه ما حدا يستسلم، كل إنسان بيحاول إنه يصير في يوم من الأيام يعني فنان، أو يعني أنا لسه لحتى الآن قاعد بحاول يعني، ولسه لحتى الآن قاعد بتعلم وبتدرب، يعني يتدربوا ويتعلموا أكثر، يرسموا، يكون في عندهم جرأة، ينزلوا على الشارع يمسكوا السبرايز، يبلشوا يعملوا جرافيتي، يغلطوا مرة واثنين وثلاثة، لكن يعني ما يستسلموا أبدا.
حبيبي man, we're here, that's it, with a Palestinian icon, man like Bilal.
So one of my favorite things from this video is when he says, they create death and we create life. And I think that really symbolizes Gaza and just Palestinian resilience and resistance in general. Any thoughts or comments on the video or the artist? So I'll move us on.
Which is
We watched the watermelon. Okay. So digital art and like online activism, of course, is a big part of, I would say, newer forms of Palestinian art as activism in the last couple of years. I think definitely in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot more social media conversations and presence of Palestinian resistance and artwork being featured through social media. So this is a cool quick clip of another artist in Palestine who uses digital art for their activism.
Hafiz Omar, an art activist, remembers the first time he was inspired by political art. It was during the First Intifada in 1987, when Palestinians rose up in mass popular civil disobedience aimed at ending the occupation. International political pressure faced by Israel convinced it to begin peace talks with the Palestinians, which led to the Oslo Accords, a deal to create a two-state solution. That never materialized, and life under Israeli occupation continues till this day. Hafiz's art aims to challenge the Israeli narrative and attempts to block their voices on social media.
There's a lot of lies going around. There's a lot of illusion they're trying to put into people's heads, especially the new generations, those generations that didn't live the second Intifada or didn't see all the aspects of the occupation. Our role as artists, as people who can, deliver messages, is to show them, is to tell them the truth, tell them their history, tell them their reality as it is.
More than half of the Palestinian population is under the age of 30, and they've never known anything else other than living under Israeli occupation. They've also never seen this promise that was made to previous generations by the Oslo Accords, and that is an independent state.
We look out at a world built on division and privilege.
Salim Barahmeh started an online video campaign called Uncivilized.
And told you are unworthy.
It focuses on the nuances of language when it comes to oppression and human rights abuses.
The concept behind Uncivilized is not just about Palestine, but it's a global thing. It's about how there's been double standards and really a racist approach in the way brown and black people have been covered for a very long time. Just look at the way Palestine is covered by Western media.
Many Palestinian youngsters we spoke to say the resistance against Israeli occupation is no longer one-dimensional and has moved beyond only protesting on the streets.
Changing the narrative is not going to liberate Palestine on its own, but it's such an important part because it's about redefining a new reality that moves us beyond Oslo, which really entrenched apartheid and the one-state reality we live under. So it's about defining the future, defining what we want and how we get there, and to leave the past behind.
With Palestinian youth increasingly disenfranchised with life under occupation, they're finding their voice in more ways than one, and to challenge those in power. Step, they say, in holding Israel accountable. Zara Khairat, Al Jazeera.
So I really like that end part where he talks about changing the narrative and using art to envision what comes after. I think that's really important because sometimes, we've talked about this in terms of why Palestinian culture and holding on to is really important, is that we can work to advocate and liberate Palestine, and we know it's going to happen. And we need to also be envisioning and thinking about what comes after. And so using art to, one, change the narrative and also envision post liberation, I think is really powerful. And then just like he said, like taking back the narrative, because contemporary mainstream media does not show the real Palestinian narrative. So using digital art and social media awareness for that is really important. Any thoughts or reflections on this?
Hafiz Omar, an art activist, remembers the
So the last thing I wanted to watch is there's this documentary, it's fully online, called Longing for Palestine, Art of Resistance. And it goes through different parts of Palestine and how people in those different cities, different areas, like literally from West Bank to 48 to Gaza, engage with art and use art and engage with what's around them to use art as a form of resistance. We have good amount of time left. I want to see, obviously we can't watch the whole thing. Parts of it are a little intense and or graphic. So there was only, I showed this for some of the high school students that we teach. I showed them just a specific part. I want to check in and see how we're all feeling and how much, also when I was in the refugee camp, they had a store where they converted tear gas canisters into jewelry. Yeah, that's really cool. That's actually, so the specific scene I showed here is someone who transforms the bullets into art. So yeah, I think again, the Palestinian creativity and taking something that is meant for death and creating it into something nice and livelihood is really powerful and important. I want to see how we're all feeling, how much of this we would like to watch. I can start it from the point of where I was saying they turned the bullets into art, and then just kind of see how much we want to watch. We could watch until 9 if that is good for everyone, and then we can end there. Or we can watch more if folks want to. I'm happy, but I want to just see where we're all at, because I know there's been a lot going on. And obviously I'll put this link on Google Classroom for anyone who's interested in watching more. But what are we feeling or thinking? Do we want to watch like from now until like 9:30, 9:20, or do we watch till 9, stop, and then
9:30 sounds good to me, or like 9:20.
Okay, so just keep going. Okay, so we'll just play. I'll play it from the part I wanted to get to is 31 minutes in, and the whole thing is 52 minutes. So I'm just gonna play for the beginning, and then we'll stop. That'll be perfect at where I was gonna end. It is visually graphic. And so I'm just going to give that warning because it also gives the warning. So just make it this
way. Only this road.
Oh, sorry. I'm going to make sure you guys.
That 50 meters is the thing between us and between the settlement.
What is this?
That's a gas canister.
A gas canister here in the graveyard.
It's normal.
We were able to count 1,500 gas canisters shot in one day.
Wow.
This is my house. You can see how much they shoot tear gas either.
Wow.
Usual. It is the usual thing.
شنو نسبان؟ Amir! Amir! Davili Mishu!
And they shoot him here. He ran away, and he fell down exactly here. All his blood.
Look at the blood! You have no humanity!
All the children, like we were seeing him just getting killed. Yes. أول مرة بشوف شاهد استشهد قدامي. عيطت عليه.
אין היום
ستايل كلهم مير الأرض هذه المحتلة هنضل مستمرين لحتى الموت.
مش بس ضرب حجار وهيك، لا بقدر أقاوم بالشعر، بالغناء، بالرسم،
من تحويل الطلقات أدوات القتل لمواد سلمية.
This is what Palestinians see as theirs. But technically, they only have Gaza and parts of the West Bank, what Israelis refer to as Judea and Samaria. Palestine has never been independent. The land has changed hands and names several times throughout history. It was once called the Kingdom of Israel, for example, as well as Palestina. But fast forward to 1917, the Brits are in charge. And in 1947, the UN decides to divide the British mandate for Palestine and create 2 new states. An independent home for Palestinians and a safe haven for millions of Jews scattered all over the world after centuries of persecution. Arabs were furious. They were the majority at the time and felt that they were losing out to Zionism, a movement seeking to re-establish the biblical Israel. Palestinians refused to give up, but Israel held on to its independence through war. Even when other Arabic countries joined the fight, Israel kept on winning and seizing parts of their lands. Decades on, and the international consensus seems to be that the 1967 borders are the most sensible. But as it stands, Israel withdrew from Gaza and gave Palestinians autonomy in some parts of the West Bank, like areas A and B. With no peace agreements and endless violence, Israel put up borders, checkpoints, fences, and walls to protect their citizens from terror attacks. This is part of the Israeli West Bank security barrier, or the apartheid wall, as some have called it. A violation of international law that undermines peace talks, according to many. This place is now a tourist hotspot and the best way to get immersed in the Palestinian side of the story.
Thank you.
Это очень хорошо, кафе. Это палестинский.
А вы по-русски разговариваете, да?
Как зовут ее?
Марина.
Марина, очень приятно.
أولاً أصبح الجدار هو أفضل مكان مناسب كي يضع الفنان أو الشخص رسمته عليه أو أن يوصل رسالته للعالم من هذا المكان. فقبل مدة قصيرة دعت إسرائيل أو الفريق الإسرائيلي لكرة القدم الأرجنتين فريقهم للعب في أرض إسرائيل، فرفضت الأرجنتين ذلك، فهي الأرض للفلسطينيين ونحن لن نكون شركاءكم في هذا الاحتلال في هذه الأرض.
The Argentinians said it had nothing to do with politics, and Israel's sports minister claimed terror threats were the real reason for the cancellation. This is Razan Najjar, a 21-year-old volunteer paramedic from Gaza. She was shot by Israeli soldiers at the demonstrations. More on that later.
الكثير يأخذون لبعضهم صوراً على الجدار أو يتصورون سيلفي لأنفسهم مع الجدار، فوضعت هذه المرآة لأوصل رسالة إنه كيف ترى نفسك على الجدار. وعهد التميمي هي طفلة تبلغ من العمر 15 عاماً من قرية النبي صالح من قضاء رام الله.
لما كانوا الاثنين من إيطاليا كانوا يرسموا، وأنا بحب هاي الرسمة، فهاي هدية كبيرة لعهد التميمي.
وبعد ذلك قامت قوات الاحتلال بمداهمة بيتهم والعبث بمحتوياتهم، وقاموا باعتقالها وزجها بالسجن رغم صغر سنها. هي لم تؤذي، وهي ليست إرهابية، وهي ليست مخربة وليست تهدد دولة إسرائيل كما يعتقدون أن هذه محرضة.
This video went viral around the world. What some failed to mention was that this was after soldiers had shot and injured her 15-year-old cousin in the head. She was 16 when she was arrested and sent to prison along with her mother, who filmed this. We were heading to meet Ahed's relatives. Movement is restricted for Palestinians in the West Bank. Most need a permit to cross into a different area, and Israel has the right to refuse the request or to close the gate, citing security concerns. Nabi Saleh is a small but notorious Palestinian village where most of the residents are related to the Tamimi family. They've been activists for years, regularly holding demonstrations against settlements, military presence, and the confiscation of land.
You have no humanity, you have no mercy. Oh, just killing, just arresting children. You arrested my brother, he's 13 years old.
Jana is one of the youngest journalists in the world. She was a child when she started reporting on what happens here.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Occupation no more.
Good, how are you?
Hi.
Hi.
Noel.
Nice to meet you, Marina.
Welcome to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody.
Let's go.
In other villages, like, the demonstrations are only for men, boys, and everything. But here in Nabi Saleh, usually females are leading everything. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so it's all about girl power here as
Yeah. We have, like, nearly 350 people got arrested, like, maybe a person got arrested 3 times, 4 times. Yeah, not only 1 time. We have also about 350 people got injured.
Muhammad, they arrested him when he 18 and a half.
Because they maybe saw him at a protest or something, why?
They said he threw stones.
He threw stones?
He threw stones? Maybe.
Well,
They
maybe
don't-
not.
Maybe yes, maybe not. Hello.
That's my uncle. He document everything.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
This is my YouTube channel, and I'm trying to upload or document anything I can from what's happening in the village here. I have a lot of videos. I began to document in 2010, since the beginning of the weekly demonstration, which began in the village here.
Why are they throwing? What's happening?
What's happening that usually the youth don't accept the soldiers or the Israeli army to be in our village, and they know that they are coming to arrest or to kill or to shoot against the people here. You can see how much they shoot tear gas either.
Wow.
Usually, it is the usual thing. In 2010, 2011, we were able to count 1,500 gas canister shot in one day.
Wow.
Many times, it's happened many times. If they notice anything, they can immediately come to the village. They try to chase the youth.
Who they brought you today to kill more than people? Are you coming to kill here? Don't you know who are you killing?
And when they come here to arrest someone, why do they come? Because someone was throwing something at them and then they come to you?
99% yes. They came to anyone who's filmed or they have information about any of the youth who was throwing stones. And that's what's happened with my 2 sons 6 months ago. In this video, you can see when they arrest my first son, when they came after midnight to the house. This was in my house.
بلال تبيمي؟
بلال.
أهلا وسهلا، وأنت شو الاسم؟
We are sleeping here. They
Bang on the door?
Yes, very hard. And Bilal opened his house and they go and search everything. And they come to my house here. My mother, she's sleeping because she's
She makes kidney dialysis, so she was sleeping and everything, and they came wake her up with
They
a
go to
sniper room, and then they put all of his parents, his brother and sister, his young brother and sister in a room.
الله يسعدك الله يسعدك ولك شرف إلا أنت لما تكون بالسجن.
And the second one, they arrest him 10 days after while he was coming back from his work in Ramallah.
So this is where what happened? Can you tell me?
Before 2 weeks, the soldiers come here and they shoot Azzeddin. He's just 19 years. The soldiers near the tree, he stopped there. The first one, he shoot him here, exactly here, yes. They shoot him another live bullet in his neck. Yes. And he fell down exactly here. All his blood. My kids, Jannah and Samer, they saw the soldiers when he his blood like this, they hit him. After that, she make a live video.
Here's all his blood. مقتحم القرية. تصاب شابه يستشهد.
It's very difficult to know about the kids when they saw the blood, they saw somebody friend, you know, he's a friend.
That's we name it a small rocket that when it come you cannot feel your hand. This it takes about 60 ones, and then they shoot them from the jeep, and those are the ones that have also this, but they shoot them from the guns.
So you've become like an expert in this, huh?
Yeah, like I'm living with those for 9 years. Here are the gas canisters. Those are gas canisters that we collected only from around the house. We drew the map of Palestine with those here, over there. And we did it to show the world that we can make from the things that can make us die a life. We can see the settlement from everywhere. Like I can see it from my house, from my window, from my garden, from everywhere. They come raid the village, sometimes try to burn mosques and try to shoot people. Once they got the fire bottles, and that's why we have those. They usually throw them on the windows to burn the houses.
The settlers?
Yeah. It's really big. Like, it's not only this mountain. There's another mountain in the other side of this settlement. That's a balloon that they fly that have a camera.
Who?
Israelis.
Israelis have a camera in that balloon?
Yeah.
And is that how they monitor, I guess, what's happening here?
Over the years, hundreds of thousands of Israelis have moved to the West Bank and established settlements. It's illegal under international law and is often at the expense of Palestinian homes.
See? That's a part of the bomb canister. They take it off, and then it just explodes. Sometimes bullets fell from them.
Really?
And we pick them up and then take the thing inside them, just throw it, and then make it a necklace.
Do you have a necklace like
I
that?
had one, yeah, and I gave it for Ahad, and now she's in prison.
Oh.
Like we have here 13 houses who have demolishing orders for being in Area C.
So this is half an area considered half zone B, half zone C.
Yeah, but like
Where's the half? How do they know? Where's the divided line?
There is a map that we know the lands. Here, see the gas canister.
And who lived there?
Fortunately, the people who were living there, they were in the U.S. So yeah.
They moved?
Yeah.
Okay.
Come here, you can see the yellow gate over there.
Is that a checkpoint?
That's a checkpoint.
That's the checkpoint.
That's the Israeli tower. Yeah. Here's the settlement.
Yeah, we can see it clearly now.
Yeah.
It looks, can I just say that it looks completely different. The houses there look completely different to the houses here.
Yeah. See, we have water tanks because we have water problems and they don't have. Those black things are water tanks. They stole the water spring, so we had to get water only 12 hours a week. The settlers got the water 24 hours. And you can see how much green is over there because they have water. Here's an Israeli Jeep down there. Here's the graveyard.
What is this?
That's a gas canister.
A gas canister here in the graveyard?
It's normal. Here, that's a mortar. The first mortar. It's not the first mortar of Nabi Saleh, but it's the first mortar from the demonstrations. And here's the second mortar. He's my uncle. He was killed when he was looking on the demonstration. He was coming back from his work. He worked as a policeman. They shoot him with live munition. So that's the grave of Az, the last martyr, 19 years old. He was killed before 2 weeks. And all the children, like we were seeing him just getting killed near us. كنت نايم سمعت صوت طخ طلعت أشوف شو في انتبهنا له قلنا له ينتبه إنه في جيش محوطين المنطقة هاي بعدين لف راح منطقة سمعنا صوت طخ حاولنا نشوف شو فيه شفنا الجنود هجموا جري شفنا واحد مرمى على الأرض حاولت أنزل بس الجندي ما خلانيش رفع السلاح علي وطلعت على السطح شفتهم بضربوا فيه.
Look at the blood! You have no humanity! You have no humanity when you kill a child directly on his hand! We want him to take him to the hospital!
أول مرة بشوف شهد استشهد قدامي عيطت عليه.
Some accuse the Tamimis of using their children as props to provoke clashes with the IDF to spark another big uprising. But the kids would tell you that their frustration doesn't come from brainwashing, but from the reality they face and live with every day.
كوني درست الفنون فبحس اني جزء لا اتجزأ من هذا المجتمع، واجبي اني اعبر عن الاشياء اللي بعاني منها، واثنين منحوتين بخامة الاسمنت واللي بيعبروا عن اللي هم كونهم شاهدين على جرائم هذه الحرب الأطفال. في طفل مرسوم على خشبة الصبار أو اللي هي جذور الصبار، هو كانت يعني تتمحور حول مثلا اقتحامات في الليل واخذ بعض سكان البلد، بالاضافه الى وجود المعسكر وخاصه انه قبال البيت عندنا. كمان شغله يعني بعض الصور اللي كنت اصورها لما اجي اعمل لوحه على نبته الصبار يظهر بالصوره شكل المستعمره على الخلفيه تاعت الصوره في نهايتها. العمل فوبيا هو مشروع تخرجي بيتكون من 3 لوحات، بيحكي عن مرض من الامراض الاضطرابات النفسيه وهو مرض الفوبيا. فحاليا احنا بما ان ابناء هذه المنطقه غير المعروفه بأحداثها بمخاطرها. صار الواحد عنده نوع من التشويش. هذا أنا نفسي الألوان اللي استخدمها هي الألوان الرمادية اللي بتدل على كونها ألوان حيادية، كذلك بتدل على عدم معرفة الشيء الجديد اللي ممكن يجينا، يعني كأنه إحنا بنعيش في مرحلة تشويش وفزع وخوف من المجهول. في النهاية هنا في عمل كمان بيحكي برضو عن الصبر والتحمل والثبات. برضو كان هو عمل تركيبي بيرمز اللي هو صمود وثبات أهل غزة في مسيرة العودة اللي صارت في آخر شيء.
Over in Gaza, this is what's been happening every Friday. Tens of thousands of Palestinians gather at various points along the Gaza-Israel border, demanding an end to the blockade and the right to return home. It started as part of a 6-week campaign called the Great March of Return. It became really intense around mid-May when Israel marked its 70th Independence Day. It's also when Palestinians mark Nakba Day, when they were displaced and had to flee. We arrived when the protests were still underway.
عادي زي وطني هذا دافع عن وطني.
ضفة كلها شعب واحد. كل جمعة باجي. احنا مصرين نضلنا نيجي هنا لن نحرر بلدنا. احنا ما فينا حاجة. أي أولادنا كل أحفادنا معنا. احنا مسيرة سلمية جايين.
احنا جايين هنا ندافع عن أراضينا وبلدنا. جايين نطلع اليهود من أراضينا ونجيب حق العودة ونجيب القدس. أنا جاي على عكاكيز هان مشان أخلي الناس تشوف إن هاينا لسه ضايلين مستمرين هان في الأرض هذه المحتلة. هنضل مستمرين لحتى الموت.
Teenagers usually throw firebombs or burn tires to obscure the view for Israeli snipers, who in turn tear gas them and often use rubber bullets as well as live rounds. Israel claims this is to stop mass infiltration and bombs being placed along the border, as they can't see because of the flames. More recently, Palestinians started flying incendiary kites and balloons. This causes fires on the other side, costing Israel a lot of money and scaring Israelis who live nearby.
It's a mess here, really. You never know what's happening and whether they're shooting, whether they're tear gassing.
Dozens end up injured here every time, and many have died.
Why did you have to kill to stop them scaling the fence?
Everything you said, Mr. Howard, has been tried, and other things, and it didn't work. And in fact, nobody intentionally went out to kill anyone. People died accidentally. And I can tell you that Hamas at a certain point said, not enough people are being killed.
This is Gaza's current status. It's one of the most overpopulated places on Earth and on the brink of collapse. Israel withdrew its forces in 2005, but still keeps a noose on it, with air, ground, and sea blockades. It's also under economic sanctions. Gaza is often described as an open-air prison. Locals elected Hamas as their leaders here. They don't believe that Israel should exist, so naturally, both sides regularly bomb each other. Israel tends to send warning leaflets before a strike, but locals mostly stay put. Many countries classify Hamas as a terrorist organization and accuse them of putting people at risk, either by hiding weapons in schools and mosques or by encouraging them to join protests.
لسان حالك أيها الشبل الفلسطيني يا شبل الإسلام يا ابن القائد اليوم تتحد برب إخوانك وجيرانك اليوم تلتزم بدمائك بدماء بعض.
On Saturdays, there's often a funeral here. The whole village comes out to pay their respects. Another kid has died at the protest. To them, Abu Yasser is a martyr.
ياسر عادي اجوا البساط تاعت العودة طلع فيهم انه ياسر لسه ما صارش عمره 12 سنة. ياسر لسه عمره 11 سنة و9 شهور. عندنا هنا احنا قطاع غزة كله مساحته محدودة جدا. لا عندنا الطفل لما بيلاقي فرصة انه يطلع على بحر مع مسجد او انه يطلع على الحدود بيلاقيها فسحة. لا لهم مثلا ملاعب يطلعوا فيها، لا لهم منتزهات يطلعوا فيها. اجا طلق طايش طيب الولد. كان هو وثلاث اطفال بيلعبوا. اكثر ما عملنا في هذه المسيرات السلميه انها بقى صارت طائرات ورقيه. الطائرات الورقيه صار يرتد عليها بصواريخ ورصاص متفجر. طفل زي ياسر انه ينضرب في راسه في رصاص متفجر ما ميزنا الا بعد الاطباء ما عملوا لف راسه وغسلوا امه ما ميزته الا من لبسه.
Israel has launched its biggest offensive against Gaza in years. The United Nations is urging Israel to halt excessive force. Amnesty International accuses it of violating international law. But this isn't the first time. We tried to talk to the IDF and they refused our requests for comment. As their stance hasn't changed over the years, here's what their spokesperson told me in 2014.
I would ask what is the alternative to just let Hamas terrorists continue their barrage of aggression. Every 2 years they're carrying out a barrage, an attack against Israeli civilians, and they cannot expect that this will go on. They have amassed an arsenal of about 10,000 rockets. They are all poised and pointed to Israel. Our civilians are unable to move. Children today are not allowed, could not be allowed to go to kindergarten. Children could not go to summer camp. They had to stay in the safe room. It's unacceptable. We're not willing to let this go, and that's why the military has been charged to protect the state of Israel. Our mission is to safeguard the civilians.
Let's not forget that there are Palestinian civilians also being killed in the process.
Absolutely, and I would actually point that finger and say, Hamas, what are you doing to prevent the escalation? They are doing everything in their power to escalate the situation, to cause more casualties, civilians, whether they're Israelis or Palestinians. Us, on the other hand, we are using pinpoint precision munitions. We are using intelligence-based targeting. We are doing everything in our power. It is unfortunate that instead of investing so much in the terrorist infrastructure of Gaza, in the thousands of tons of cement that went into the building of terrorist tunnels, that their only intention was to infiltrate Israel and kill Israelis.
This is what Israelis get upset about, that the bombing on their side doesn't get as much coverage in the news. After all, people on this side of the border also live with fear and bombs.
When I ran to the shelter, I felt the entire kibbutz shaking from the bombs. It was scary. The situation here between us and Gaza is really complicated.
So when Israel attacks in Gaza, we're going after the missile fire. We don't never initiate an attack. This is who they're aiming for, kids, kindergarten kids, and yet the world still points a finger to Israel. I don't understand it on a moral level.
Kids get injured on both sides, but Palestinians have always suffered significantly more losses. Not that this puts them off, as even those who get injured vow to come back until they can't.
هذا هو أحمد في رجليه تنتهي برقبه طلق متفجر.
أنا كنت واقف في مسيرة على الحدود فبحكي مع الشاب لقيت طلق من هنا وطلق من هنا.
يعني أنا واحد منهم كنت واقف جنب مسعف في الدفاع المدني بكون أخويا فينا أنا وياه لقيته صار إطلاق نار على واحد كلا في رجله فراح أخويا يسعفه كنت أنا واقف رحت معاه وصار يسعف فيه بعد فيش يعني دقيقة اللي هو ما لقيت إلا الطلق جاي في رجله وقعت على جنبهم على الأرض إن شاء الله راح نتعالج حنستمر في المسيرة.
اليهود ليس له أي حق في فلسطين
اليهود هذا لاجئ اجى من جميع انحاء الاقطار العالم واجى هنا استوطن في فلسطين. انا ما بلوم اليهود، انا بلوم العرب هم اللي معطينهم الغطاء والضوء الاخضر يطخونا ويقتلونا.
انا هان بعد الاحداث بيوم باجي بجمع الطلقات اللي استخدمتها اسرائيل ضد المواطنين الفلسطينيين. في هذا المكان خطر جدا. انا بجيب بنتي بتساعدني دائما، بنتي الصغيره شاهد.
هاي وحده.
هاي شوف هذيك كيف يدخل. هذا متفجر، هذا خطر، تمسكهاش. الطويله طلع علي، الطويله يا بابا ما تمسكهاش. في الرصاص الطويله زي هذا تمسكهاش بالمره. اوكي، اغلب الرصاص اللي بنجيبه كله من المستشفيات ومن المناطق اللي فيها خطوط التماس زي الحدود والمناطق اللي كانت معرضه للقصف في الحروب والاجتياحات. الحمام وين الحمام؟ هي جابت غير امير زينه.
Do you go to demonstrations?
رحت قبل اكثر من مره. اخذتها مره بعدين
رحت على الجبل. رحت مرة أيام ما تصوب السيلفي بيومها رحنا وبعدها قال لي ما ترجعيش.
اخوي احمد اتصل علي وهو كان في مشاركه مسيره العوده. الطلقه اللي كانت في رجله في اللحم هنا استقرت في المنطقه هذه. طلعوها اكثر من قطعه صغيره، فانا عملت منها مجسم تكون ذكرى له. كنت اعملها تمثال احطه في رقبته ما زبطش، فانا اضطريت اعملها ايش؟ اعملها قاعده صغيره واحطها هنا. هذا مخيم العوده بالكامل. هدول الصحفيين، الطيارات، الدبابات الاسرائيليه القناصه، الخيام، الاسعافات. هذا المخيم اللي على الحدود انا عملته من الرصاص ومن شرايط الدبابات. هذه رصاصه. عملت كمان اللي هو تمثال العوده اللي هو الاسير خارطة فلسطين مفتاح العوده، السلك الشائك، نجمه اسرائيل. وكمان عملت هو المعاناه اللي رسمناها للقضيه الفلسطينيه. المعاناه ابنها مستشهد في ايدها حتى من عجينه السيراميك. انا اسرائيل بتتهم انه الفلسطينيين بيستخدموا الطائرات الورقيه اللي هي الطائرات الورقيه بحرق الاشجار والمزروعات الفلسطينيه. فاحنا بنذكر اسرائيل انه في 2008 اسرائيل استخدمت البلدوزر بخلع الاشجار الفلسطينيه وتدمير البيوت والاجتياحات اللي تعرضت لها المدن الفلسطينيه من دبابات المركافه ناقلات الجنود والبلدوزر. استخدمت اسرائيل هذه اللوحه كامله عن الاجتياح الاسرائيلي للمدن الفلسطينيه. فبعديها اجت فكره الشهيد اللي هو الصحفي ياسر مرتجى لما استشهد. فانا عملت له، بديت افكر كل حاجه بتصير على الارض انا اعملها. طيب يعني هذه اخوات الصحافه استهدفوها. هذا الدرع هذا بيقعد دم من الصحفي.
Israel's army insists that it only opens fire in retaliation and always investigates the deaths of innocent civilians.
يلا خلصنا. انا هذا عملتها من حولت طلقه رصاص الاسرائيلي حولتها لحمامه سلام من تحويل الطلقات ادوات القتل لمواد سلميه. فهذه هي الطلقات اللي بتستخدمها إسرائيل ضد الشعب الفلسطيني، وهذه المجسمات اللي احنا بنعملها من هذا الرصاص.
At night, when you can't see the destruction or lack of resources, Gaza is just like any other Mediterranean seaside resort. Except that people often approach to say you're welcome in Gaza, ask to take photos, and thank you for visiting them.
مش حنضل مأمنين انه الوضع سيء فاحنا بدنا نعيش عيشه سيئه، لا احنا بنحب الحياه، كلنا بندعي للرساله هذه، العالم كلها تشوف الحياه اللي احنا عايشينها. انا هي زميلك كلنا خريجين جامعه ومخلصين، عندك محامي
احنا بندور على بصيص امل انه احنا نصنع لنفسنا السعاده في ظل الاوضاع الراهنه الموجوده اللي كنا بنعرفها، يعني من حصار وقتل ودمار.
ايش رايكم بالمسيرات اللي بتصير على الحدود؟
هيك انت؟
انا ضد.
انا ضد.
ضد وبشده وبشده وبشده.
انا كمان. ليش؟
يعني فعليا خرب الدنيا يعني. يعني بيبعتوه منها بموتوا وبتطخبخوا واعاقات وبتترمى النسوان وناس بتموت ومن دون نتائج، النتائج تنعكس كلها لمصالح شخصية فقط، التلفون واحد كله يروح، تلفون واحد كله يروح.
مجرد انه انا عايش فانا بخدم بلدي، انا بدرس وبقدم لبلدي فانا هيك بخدمها، ولما اتزوج واجيب اولاد فانا بخدم بلدي. بحب الله، احنا بنحبش الموت.
تكبير واحد على الجامع كله بهلل وبيطلع ومحدش فاهم حاجه، بروحوا بيرجعوا معاقين، وهذا اللي حيكون عايشين على عديم المجتمع لانه حرام ظلم.
So I'm going to stop it there because I think that was an interesting point to end on. And I just want to make sure we have some time to discuss. You can, of course, finish there's like 20 minutes left of it if you want. But I know that was a lot, graphic and emotionally heavy. But there were also the little moments of, again, turning death into something that represents life. The Israeli, news part was interesting too. I think, I think some of the things just as they were saying, we have to go in the shelters, and it's like, but you have a shelter and there's an iron dome that protects from rockets and weapons even coming to into Israel. And yeah, so I think I get what the documentary was trying to do with the both sides. Obviously it was still leaning towards Palestine, but even just, yes, both sides get harmed, but again, power and privilege and things like that. But just any comments, thoughts about everything we watched? I think the end also gave us a good, not all Palestinians are homogenous, not all Palestinians think the same. So for those men that were sitting there, they don't necessarily agree with the marches and the protests, and to them, getting their degree and having a family and succeeding in that way is their way of being part of the resistance and the resilience. So there's a lot of different ways that people view and are a part of. Not everyone thinks the same. And I think that's also important to not homogenize all Palestinians in the same way. But yeah, any thoughts or comments, reflections? If not, we can end here. I know that was a lot too, and it was pretty graphic, so I know it's late and that was a lot. But I think what I like about it is that it shows a lot of different forms of art being used. So it started with the journalist, started with the youth. I think the focus on the youth is really important. The person who paints on the actual cacti, right, as a way of you literally can't take this. I think the conversation about the wall was also interesting, putting the graffiti and the art up there is important, but then does it just become a tourist thing to take pictures of? And so complicating that conversation. And then of course the person who turns the bullets into art with his whole family too. I think just the way that the family is involved So again, intergenerational resistance is a big part of Palestinian culture, right? And all like bringing in the youth and the elders and everyone together. And I think that was really showcased by this. Yeah, I'm going to give us a second for any thoughts before I just remind us of the questions for our last class next week. Okay, so just a reminder, next week is gonna be us listening to all of you. So again, no pressure to prepare anything before coming to class. I'm gonna give us at least 10 minutes, just of quiet kind of trying to think of how you all want to answer these. I don't want to make anyone feel like they have to do any work outside of these 2 hours. But again, if you need more time, you think you usually need more time or like having questions, they're here. So the next class, we're just going to go around. I'll probably, I'll start with a couple of things, just offerings from PAC and just things in general of ways you can continue being involved in Palestinian advocacy and community, whether locally or virtually on a national level. So I'll kind of start us off with that, and then we'll just go into hearing you all answer these 6 questions. And these questions are also on Google Classroom in the general documents tab. It's called questions to reflect on for the last class. But yeah, we're gonna have everyone go around and share answers to these questions. And then Alston will give us a little more in-depth sharing of his trip to Palestine. And if anyone else wants to share anything else about Palestine or recent trips, we can make space for that too. Any questions or comments about next week or anything in general? If not, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you all for a great class.